The Prince of Neuchatel was not any more discouraged than myself or the rest of us. We made it a point to seize every opportunity of enlightening His Majesty about the real state of affairs, to allay that spirit of excitement which tended to drive us forward, trusting in luck alone. Never was the truth so dinned into the ear of a sovereign, though, alas, to no effect. But it is only fair to say that, if the emperor was far from welcoming the truth, because it ran counter to his wishes, he did not reject it violently. At bottom, he was not even unduly aggravated with those who had the courage to tell it, perhaps because he attached no value to it. Those who had access to the emperor were worried as much over the state of irritation engendered in him by the annoyances of the campaign as they were by the intoxication arising from his illusions, which last were encouraged by the very small number of persons who still shared them. The detractors of this great epic may say what they like. Never was sovereign surrounded by more capable men who were honest before all else and not mere courtiers, however strong the admiration and attachment which they professed for the great man. In spite of the varying shades in character and habits of each of them, wherever the emperor cared to probe, he was sure to find, if he wanted it, a sterling and even disagreeable truth rather than mere flattery. Whether because there had been a surfeit of glory or because common sense had taught us to distrust its glamour, the fact remains that no one was intoxicated with it. We remained moderate and good Frenchmen above all. It must be credited to the honor of the emperor that his principles, his impartiality, the staunchness... What is this? What was that? Doggies. Doggies. Okay. It must be credited to the honor of the emperor that his principles, his impartiality, the staunchness of his confidence, which kept the spirit of intrigue at arm's length, had all contributed to the birth and growth of these noble sentiments. The master's well-known dislike of any change among his entourage gave everyone a sense of security which proved greatly to the advantage of truth. His strength of will had united all opinions and checked all private ambitions. France and the emperor were blended in a glory which had become common to both. He had subjugated all minds, and without their knowing it, had bent the wills of all men to cooperate in the accomplishment of his own. Who has not been carried away by the ascendancy of that superior genius, by the preeminently sovereign qualities, by his good nature, which was that of a private man in his own intimate circle? Who has not admired in him the great captain, the legislator, the restorer of social order, the man, in short, to whom the country owed its internal prosperity and the end of civil war? The revolution checked, religion reestablished, our laws, our administration, our industry increased 100-fold. The prosperous state of our finances, was not all this the constant proof to us of our debt to the emperor and of what we could still hope for from him? If some persons, however, perceived the dangers of a collapse, when such continual success and glory were likely to delude the good sense of the majority, their foresight only applied to the particular situation in which they found themselves. The emperor had changed the national character. The French had become serious. Their bearing was grave. The great questions of the day preoccupied all minds. Petty interests were subordinated. The general sentiment was, one may say, patriotic. One would have blushed to show any other. The men who surrounded the emperor prided themselves on not flattering him. Some even paraded the need of telling him the truth at the risk of displeasing him. It was the spirit of the time. This reflection could not have escaped those who had eyes. Opposition, as the emperor noticed, did not cause the zeal or devotion of anyone to relax. He paid little attention to it and attributed it in general to narrow views and to the fact that few people were capable of grasping his great projects in their entirety. It is certain that this opposition, if I may judge from my own case, arose solely from the wish to protect the interests of the emperor's peculiar glory. What personal sentiment or interest could have held sway amid such a unanimous concert of devotion? Who could then foresee what has since happened, I can assert that no one was moved except by the interests of France and the need of preserving the prodigies of the emperor's glory. Only this twofold interest could be opposed to the inordinate ambitions of that glory, all the dangers of which a secret instinct seems now to be revealing. This enthusiasm of the emperor, this ambition that induced him to run such hazards so far from France, certainly grew more noticeable to everyone as soon as the trend of events began to breed doubt of its success. Moreover, everyone condemned it in him privately, but peace, always rejected by England and forever, represented the emperor as the motive of all his enterprises, justified him in the eyes of a nation over which, for some time to come, power and imagination would still hold more influence and even more dominion than reason and experience. Only 10 days later had elapsed after our arrival at Vitebsk before it became necessary to send 10 or 12 leagues for fodder. The inhabitants who had not fled were everywhere in arms. Consequently, it was impossible to find any means of transport. Horses already in need of rest were further enfeebled by having to go in search of food, and were exposed together with the men to the danger of being caught by the Cossacks or slaughtered by the peasants, as frequently happened, having no further hopes that the enemy might attack him, as he had made himself believe when he knew that Prince Bagration had joined up with the main army, August 4th, and, on the other hand, being unable to give his own army the rest it needed so long, as the enemy was in force so close at hand, the emperor decided on the 10th to follow him. He announced his intention of moving his right across the Dnieper at Rosanna, while the Russians, with the same object in view, would be carrying out the same movement in order to attack us on the right bank of the river. The emperor left Vitebsk on the 12th at 11 o'clock in the morning. On the morning of the 13th, he was at Rosasna on the left bank of the Dnieper. The guard arrived during the day. A very weak garrison had been left at Vitebsk with the sick and wounded. The emperor planned to fight a big battle and drive back the enemy so that he should be able to rest his army and organize the country for winter quarters, while his corps on the Dwina should act with the same end in view. He was still fixed in his original purpose. He desired to reorganize everything so as to be in a position to march on the capitals when the spring campaign opened, if the measures he hoped to take and the consequent embarrassment of the Russian government did not induce the Petersburg cabinet to make peace during the winter or even before. The emperor counted on this outcome more eagerly than ever, for he was already tired of the war and, as he said, would not raise difficulties in the matter of peace conditions.